Hello again, Ice and Fire Miniatures Wargamers, Kolvox here, coming to you with another Milestone Campaign League faction deep dive video, and this time we're talking about the Greyjoys. Let's get into it. So when we think about Greyjoy theme, we think about Iron Fleets, we think about the projection of naval threat all over Westeros, and that is how this strategy sheet is designed. When you play as the faction leader for House Greyjoy in the Milestone Campaign League, you should feel that all of your opponents are terrified to set sail anywhere around their territory. You should always be looking for opportunities to strike at vulnerable ports, park fleets in critical waterways to blockade transit, and when your foes are foolish enough to face you at sea, they should do so at a scary disadvantage. Just like all of the other factions, we wanted to make sure that Greyjoys are fun to play in a very canon-friendly way, but then in later playthroughs, or if you have a different personality, it should be fun to play Dark Greyjoys in terms of playing Greyjoy in a non-canon way. So a canon way would be always looking out for number one, focusing solely on your own faction's interests as you climb through the might ranks, versus a more altruistic play style where maybe you link up with just one or two strong allies, stay focused in those alliances, protect your friends' territories at sea, and help them crush their enemies together. The Greyjoys are unique in a lot of ways, but one of the ways is that they don't really fit into the two big categories of might rank strategies amongst the other factions. So you have a lot of factions like Lannister, Baratheon, Targaryen, who start very dominant, will keep their high might rankings likely through much of the game and are trying to repress those other factions, keep them down, and make sure that they end up on top. And then you have a lot of factions with really strong catch-up mechanics, like the Brotherhood Without Banners and the Night's Watch, who are going to get these big lump sums of might at the very end of the campaign for playing their faction correctly. The Greyjoys start off low on the might rank, and they do not get a very large lump sum at the end of the game. That makes them unique to play because you really have to ramp up your power and be making gains up that might rank ladder every month. So to get a grasp of what makes the Greyjoys so unique, let's take a minute to look at the map and understand sea movement, and then look at the different battle types and understand sea battles, which are going to be clutch for the Greyjoys. So looking at the map here, all the other factions, whenever they have a commander in play at sea, and they've moved that commander to sea, that commander can only make movement from one sea region to another sea region per month. In the campaign, you are probably not going to see many other factions sending commanders out to sea for a number of reasons. Number one, there's nothing to conquer or sack out at sea. Number two, there are no regional or developmental perks to sea regions, so there's not really a reason for people to be sitting on them, holding them. Most of the other factions are either going to be simply traveling through the sea by dock on their way to somewhere else, or maybe placing a commander out there for a skirmish to try and encircle an opponent that they hope to vanquish with a challenge battle on a coastal region. One benefit to being at sea for all commanders is that when a commander is on land in a land region, they are bound to the realm that they're in. They can only move that month within that realm or one region outside that realm. Whereas if they are in a sea regions, most of them are touching multiple realms, and when a commander's in a sea region, they can count themselves in that month as being connected to two different realms. So it's a way of projecting threat so that your enemies don't know in the next challenge phase whether you plan on landing in one realm or plan on landing in another realm. Now, how are the Greyjoys different from that? Well, for a few reasons. First of all, whenever the Greyjoys are on the map, they don't count as a regular fleet. They count as an Iron Fleet. These are Greyjoy fleets, much, much stronger. And this is where the Greyjoys draw most of their power and their army list bonuses. Iron fleets always must stay at sea. They're always commanded by the same commander, or they have to be passed off to a different commander. And they are able to traverse 2 sea regions instead of just one whenever they are placed on the board in a challenge. Doesn't apply to skirmishes, but for challenges, they can move 2, whereas all the other factions can only move 1 when they're moving from one sea region to another. This gives Iron fleets a huge aggressive reach. Okay, so now we've seen why the Greyjoys are so deadly on the campaign map. Here's why they're so deadly on the individual battle maps. Any battles that take place in sea regions are automatically sea battles. They're not Break the Siege or the traditional field battles. As you can see here, the sea battles are deeply inspired by the Assault on the Targaryen Fleet, which is a custom scenario made by Shane over at Boardman Gaming and uses his battle map. For my campaign, we've also used some simple craft paper to make an overlay for this battle map to use in our real life battles. So as you can see, there's 2 hulls of ships that the opposing armies start out on, and they are connected by 3 different boarding ramps. So it's a ship-to-ship boarding action. If any combat units pass over any of the water-colored areas, then they take damage through this keyword called torrent, which is huge. It's a bunch of auto wounds, and that's representing individual soldiers falling off and overboard these ships and drowning in the waters below. So you will quickly be able to realize that because this map just has these 3 boarding ramps for the 2 armies to get at each other, this map type will highly favor archers and probably create a pretty big problem for most cavalry. Opponents who rely on a lot of speed and the ability to get around to behind their opponents and flank them and use their movement to set up all sorts of rear or flank attacks are going to really struggle with sea battles, and they're going to have to rethink their strategy. Also, any players who heavily rely on traditional terrain pieces from the base game are going to have to rethink their strategies because there are no other terrain effects in a sea battle, just the torrent. It's been really fun in testing and in our own campaign to see these sea battles take place where Ironborn bowmen are set up between the boarding ramps while Greyjoys rush aboard the enemy ship while taking arrow fire. It's just a super fun and different twist on the traditional CMON gameplay, and it's meant to give the Greyjoys an edge. Okay, let's get into the strategy sheet and learn a little bit more about these Iron fleets. So on the bottom left corner here, you have your roster that you're going to be filling up throughout the campaign about all the details of your Iron fleets. At the beginning of month 1, you start with 2 free Iron fleets. Those fleets must be placed in Iron Man's Bay and Sunset Sea respectively. Those are the 2 sea regions bordering Pike itself. Now you'll see here that when Iron fleets participate in sea battles, unless their opponent is the Master of Ships commander, they do not gain commander or might rank list bonuses. So you most likely want to put your best commanders in your Iron fleets and then beef them up and customize them the way that you want to get wins with them. They're going to have a better chance of getting victories through the size of their force compared to other factions than any forces that you send on land. When commanders are assigned to an Iron fleet, they count as fleet captains rather than just commanders. So when fleet captains make challenges during challenge phase, instead of moving them onto the adjacent land piece, you're going to leave them at sea, but they still count as making the challenge on the land region. When an Iron fleet is created, you're going to assign it a flagship from the right side over here. And as the Greyjoy faction leader, you're going to be wanting to look for the most interesting and high-powered combinations that you can come up with. Right off the bat, you should notice that a lot of the cannon combinations will be powerful, like Victarion in the Iron Victory, Euron aboard the Silence, etc. After that, you're going to select support vessels for your fleet. Now, each of the 8 Iron Islands offers their own support vessels to make up these Iron fleets. During month 1, each of your starter Iron fleets gets their first support vessels for free. All supports grant +1 might per month, plus some additional perks, and you can see those on the map in the center of the strategy sheet. Again, the name of the game is coming up with the strongest combination that works best for your plans on the campaign map. Now, even though you got those first 2 supports for free, all the later ones cost coin. 1 coin for the first support in a fleet, 2 for the second, 3 for the third. The Greyjoys could struggle with coin early on, but the idea is that they'll make it back primarily through 2 means. Number 1, through sacking, of course, and number 2, through projecting threat on the campaign map and getting payments of coin from the other factions who are trying to stave off an attack. The last element to Iron Fleets are vendettas. Each fleet can have 1 vendetta, but you don't get these right off the bat. They have to be earned as you play the game. So you can see them there at the bottom center of the strategy sheet. And these are an element that you want to be looking at early on and making plans for future months about which fleet captains you're trying to link with which vendettas. Remember, each Iron Fleet can only have 1, so you need to make sure you make the right pairings and then combine them with the right flagship and support to make the most powerful Iron Fleet that you can to bring death to your enemies. Now you can also see here that at the end of each month, you're going to gain +2 might from each Iron Fleet that you have, in addition to all the might from the supports or flagships that apply. And then take careful note right in the middle there that fleet captains gain +4 might each time they participate in a sea battle, and another +4 if they get a victory out of that sea battle. There's lots of other rules and clarifications here about fleet captains getting injured, captured, or killed. There's clarification about the timing of the creation of the fleets. So the creation of new fleets when conditions are met, unlocked by these different 6 locked slots, actually happens before might and coin are calculated at the start of each month. You'll want to make sure that that's declared right at the beginning of council phase. As you can see, the 6 later fleet slots are sort of ordered in order of difficulty. So the first one's unlocked from your first victory. The second one's unlocked for having 2 successful sacks. The third slot you unlock when you've had victory over 3 different factions. The fourth is for 2 intercept battles. The 5th is for 3 conquers, and you don't unlock that 8th fleet unless you get victory over 5 different factions in your campaign. Now, even though the fleets are listed in this order, you may unlock them in any order. So if you happen to do 2 intercept battles before you get 2 sacks, you unlock that fleet slot and the prior ones stay locked. You'll notice that the later fleet slots that are a little bit trickier to unlock allow you to spawn those fleets up farther away from pike. Okay, let's take a look at the Greyjoy character traits. The first thing that should jump out to you is you've got a lot of options for Plunderer, and Plunderer does stack, so the Greyjoys are going to have a lot of ways to maximize coin value from sacking. You will also notice a lot of instances of Traveler, which allows you to ignore location restrictions when playing as an attachment version. Of course, this is to make it so that Iron Fleets on one side of the world are able to use those attachments from characters acting as fleet commanders quite far away. The Greyjoy faction leader should be cautious because the Greyjoy roster is not very big compared to a lot of the other factions. You should take special note of your 2 instances of the Ritual Drowning trait, which Aaron Greyjoy and Baron Blacktide both have, and also Experienced Healer on Windermere. You're going to need as many characters as you can to keep all of these Iron Fleets running at maximum strength, so be careful with them. And don't forget to use Mokoro's Visions of the Future when you run into a particularly clutch battle. You have Euron Greyjoy as your source of deadly foe, so wherever he is serving as an Iron Fleet captain or wherever you're threatening your opponents to use him as an attachment, definitely make sure to be very vocal about that and see if you can get your enemies to back down or make concessions in fear of using that ability. Okay, finally, let's get over to the map. So you have Pike over here, which is beautifully safe and secure all throughout month 1. Of course, it is a capital, and you're also going to have 2 iron fleets on either side of it, so you can focus on all offense month 1. Now, those earlier, easier to get fleets are all going to spawn up in the western seas closer to Pike. So you need to very early on figure out what your diplomacy is going to be like with those western factions. So we're looking at the Starks here, very likely to get into some type of war with them, especially if they make the Sacrifice 1 at the end of month 1, in which case they're also grabbing Cape of Eagles, River Run, and the Crossing. Do not make the mistake of conquering Cape of Eagles month 1 just to have it freely taken by the Starks at the start of month 2 through their ability. Farther south, we have the Lannisters and Baratheons. The Lannisters, of course, are your number 1 person that you're going to be interacting with. If you have cooperative Lannisters who want to be sharing a little bit of that extra wealth, use that to your advantage. Maybe consider leaving them alone or making a treaty with them to stay out of their business for X number of months. The Baratheons, however, have so much territory and are just a little bit farther away, which makes them more likely to forget about you or be overwhelmed with the number of territories and the directions that they're trying to defend. An early sneak attack into the mouth of the Mander is a nasty option. Once you get into the mid and later games, of course, your options expand. Up here in the Bay of Ice, you can get involved in any side of the conflict between Free Folk, Night's Watch, or the Starks. Remember, you're the Greyjoys, so leverage your threats against them. Make sure that the people who aren't getting hit are paying you, and the ones who are getting hit with the nastiest Iron Fleet compositions that you could cook up. In late game, of course, Blackwater Bay is a tempting prize, a great opportunity for you to get at the Iron Throne and potentially take King's Landing. Obviously, in the back of your mind needs to always be the Master of Ships. That's the player who's going to be able to use commander bonuses and might rank bonuses against you even in sea battles. So always be conscious of who that player is, and if you are appeasing them, threatening them, standing off against them, or maybe you are them. Of course, there are drawbacks for the Greyjoys to be Master of Ships. There is a quite strong vendetta that you won't be able to unlock if you have ever held the title of Master of Ships, but that is a valid option of ways to play the Greyjoys if you don't mind missing out on that vendetta and just want to make sure that you don't have to deal with the threat of somebody else being Master of Ships. That will also, of course, give you access to the nasty Master of Ships blockade mechanic. So to wrap things up, when playing as the Greyjoys, always remember, we do not sew. The Greyjoys are going to be underpowered when it comes to conquering and holding mainland territory. Higher might rank factions are very likely to edge them out unless the Greyjoys make some strong alliances. On the other hand, the Greyjoys are always going to be dominant at sea. They're always going to be dominant in their ability to harness maximum coin out of sacking and just generally causing mayhem for everyone else on land. In the mid to late game, when you're able to get in the eastern waters, beware of the Targaryens. Anybody who they bring in to reinforce using SOC Armada will of course pass through your seas, so you are either going to need to have a treaty with them or prepare to fight sea battles against dragons. In order to win, you are either going to need a lot of iron fleets out, all generating that extra might, or a smaller number of iron fleets with fully stacked support lists. You're going to need to win a lot of battles, and if you do decide to start conquering territory, probably pick a place with a lot of sea regions bordering it where your iron fleets can form a sort of protective barrier and jump in to help as needed. I'll leave you with one interesting strategy to think about while you play. Some Greyjoy commanders may be trying to figure out how they can pull off an intercept, especially at sea, for a truly devastating Greyjoy win. This can be a problem when all of your opposing factions are so deathly afraid of your iron fleets that they don't even cross the sea anywhere near your territory. But you, as the Greyjoy player, are going to keep in mind that when your iron fleets move at sea, they're able to move 2 sea regions instead of the normal 1. That means that if you have an iron fleet here in the Summer Sea and any other faction happens to be traveling, say, from all the way up at the Dreadfort down into Blackwater Bay or anywhere through the Narrow Sea, you're actually able to perform an intercept there by moving your iron fleet 2 for the challenge. You're going to have to declare that when any opposing force moves through the Narrow Sea. It shouldn't require too much luck for one of your opponents to eventually miss that cue and move at the wrong time, thinking that they're going to safely traverse their seas and hit some target on a land region. Not today. The Greyjoys are here to make sure that the iron price is paid. That's it for the deep dive on House Greyjoy for the Milestone Campaign League. Enjoy.